Hey, power people. Welcome to Renewable Rides, powered by Veckta. I'm Gareth Evans, the CEO and founder.
And I'm Dan Roberts, head of sales. In each episode, we'll uncover the latest trends, learnings, challenges, and triumphs relating to the energy transition, on-site energy, and sustainability through the experiences of our inspiring guests and team here at Veckta.
So get ready for an exhilarating adventure into the fast-paced world of challenging limits, adapting purposefully, and empowering co-creation to accelerate the energy transition with those that are on a mission to create a more resilient, profitable, sustainable, and thriving energy future. So let's go. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Renewable Rides. And today I am super excited to be meeting with Zac Dobbin, who's the project director for Cleantech San Diego, as well as Calvin Fine, who's our head of marketplace operations at Veckta. So let's get after it. And I'm really excited to just get to know you a bit more and hear you share with our listeners your Renewable Rides journey.
Yeah, fantastic. And I do want to acknowledge too, you guys have been a great startup in our accelerator program, Veckta, one of our great entrepreneurs and great team behind Veckta as well. So really thrilled that you guys had me today. I feel like this is the beginning of like a good joke, like a Brit, a Kiwi, and a Canuck enter a room together, right?
That's so good.
So thrilled to be here.
How many clean energy projects can those three accomplish together?
Oh my gosh. I mean, sky's the limit, right? It means the limit. So yeah.
That's awesome. And so we'd love to just start with like, what are you passionate about? How did you end up doing what you do?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gareth. So, I from Canada originally, and I had an entrepreneur kind of degree from a Canadian university up there. And I did a little bit of that. But I decided I wanted to come to the States about 5 or 6 years ago now. So came down here for school. And it was really at that point I kind of fell in love with this concept of kind of like impact investing, right? And that kind of just led me on the path to ultimately where I am now. I had a really interesting university professor say to me, I think when I went to school, I was going to focus on like managerial leadership. And I remember sitting down with the professor and saying like, you could learn that stuff and it's a great, they're great classes, but you really want a hard skill at the end of the day. And so I kind of pivoted into finance and then kind of found that impact investing niche. I had a great class actually over in Amsterdam and I was focused on that. And after university, I started with Port of San Diego. They had a blue tech incubator program that really helped facilitate kind of aquaculture, pilot projects and other blue technologies. And it was awesome. Like we weren't in it to, the port obviously wasn't in it to make money, but just deploy really interesting technologies. And, eventually I swapped out the blue for clean and was Cleantech San Diego now working on our accelerator program. So it's, I think my passion for kind of investing in themes that kind of align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals and just ultimately have kind of world-changing impacts is important.
So how did you end up here then? Obviously, you mentioned you're a Canuck.
Yeah.
Give us a bit of a background on your story to get here, and then we can dig in onto Cleantech a bit more.
Yeah, for sure. So, I am from East Coast Canada originally.
Yeah.
I've always, I think, ever since I was a kid, kind of romanticized California and loved that whole California journey. But, I was a surfer, and I originally wanted to come out to California to kind of get into the surf industry, actually, funnily enough. But I was super naive. So I didn't realize because the US school system is so different from like the New Zealand, the British school system, right? And in Canada, all the universities are pretty similar in terms of their like pedigree and their, caliber of difficulty and kind of, culturally what they're like. But I, when I came out to California, I was like, okay, I don't want to be in the Bay Area. I don't want to be in LA, San Diego. For sure. Like, big kind of surf mecca here. And I looked up universities and saw University of San Diego. And I was like, okay, perfect. I'll apply to that one. And so when I got to school, I was like, where'd you apply to? Like I applied to 6 or 7 universities. And I was like, I just want to be in San Diego. So I applied here. And that's kind of, I talked a little bit earlier about kind of the career path to where I am now, but that's kind of what the dream was. Like I came down to just kind of experience California, kind of pursue the surf culture. see if I could get a job in that space, which didn't pan out. Still, very big avid surfer, but I'm glad where I ended up because I'm doing something. I get to work with some really cool entrepreneurs, some really cool startups that have technologies that are probably in the most important sector in the world right now, which in my opinion, which is Cleantech, right? And Cleantech and just working towards that goal of decarbonizing our industry. So
that's epic. And before you were mentioning it seems a bit more uncommon here in the US, but where we're all from, taking a bit of time out between university and kind of jumping into the real world.
Yeah.
Sounds like you did the same.
The good old fashioned gap year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was all in. And I actually did too. So when I started my undergrad in Canada, I think I jumped in it too quickly. Like my folks had pushed me to take a gap year between high school and university, but I was like, no, I'm going. Neighboring. So I actually ended up taking a year off from school and I went to Southeast Asia, did 2 months there, did a month in India, loved it. So then decided, okay, I think I'm ready for school now. Got my marks back up. And then ended up, after I graduated, going to South America for 6 months. And I bought a one-way ticket to Brazil. And I was like, you know what? When I run out of money or when I'm kind of sick of it, if I get homesick, then I'll come back. Anyways, kind of 6 months later, my brother happened to be traveling in New Zealand. So I went over and met him after and continued it on for another 2 months. But South America, it's such a fantastic area of the world that I don't think gets enough recognition. It's kind of an older crowd that backpacks around there. So we did all of Patagonia, back and forth in the Andes between Chile and Argentina, and just rented a van. And we had another sort of great trip. We had 2 Canadians and 2 Australians in the van. This funny camping van. And we went all the way down to the tip of Patagonia, checked out all the national parks. I think we stayed in like 15 different national parks down there. Just so beautiful. And then made my way back up to Ecuador, made my way up to Colombia, and then went to New Zealand from there. So it was just, I think in terms of life experiences versus like working in a career, like, I think looking back on that would probably be one of the most valuable. You learn so much here, right? You're dealing with different cultures, different languages. Like I think in terms of like accelerating your growth as a human being, and just as a person, like it's intangible what you get from that, right? So it's sort of like you learned a lot about yourself on that road trip. Exactly. Yeah. Learned what I don't like, learned how to, share a car with 3 other people for 20 days. What about you guys? Calvin, I know you traveled a little bit, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about kind of your journey after.
Yeah, for sure. I should actually introduce myself for the listeners that are on there as well. So Calvin Fine, part of the team at Veckta. I run the operations side of the business there. I was lucky enough to do the same. Came out of university and went to visit you over in Canada. I did the thing that every Australian, every New Zealander does when they graduate university and they think about going skiing. And I moved to Whistler. And spent probably 6 months there, enjoying the mountain lifestyle. We don't really have proper mountains where I grew up, in sort of the middle of Australia. So it was a pretty epic experience to go and do. What I loved about then, so I hit the road and I was probably 12 months from leaving to getting home. And completely just me and a plane ticket. I didn't have friends I was going to meet or anything. So you have to make friends on the way. If you don't want to eat dinner by yourself, you've got to go and make some friends and go out to dinner. And that's like a real push out of the comfort zone from someone who's from a relatively small town in the big scheme of things. So the thing I learned the most out of it was just hanging out with other people and meeting them and getting to know them and forming relationships and getting on with doing that sort of stuff. Super good fun.
And I think you bring up a good point too. Like, I think there's so much to be said for that experience where you're kind of forced, especially if you go on your own, you're forced out of your comfort zone. Like, you have to adapt. Like, you're not, if you just go from straight to school to work, you're always growing up in these institutional settings that kind of shape and mold who you are and how you interact with the world. But as soon as you get out there and you get outside your comfort zone, and you don't have these big institutions that give you friend groups that kind of insulate you. And, not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just think it's a totally unique way to live your life and experience life versus kind of go through the mold. It's right.
It's very easy to follow when there's a clear path that looks like it's going towards something that maybe you might want. It's very easy to just jump on the treadmill and follow the path.
Yeah.
But it's not very adventurous.
Yeah. And I was joking around with Garrett earlier. I was like, I feel like every 2 months I'm interested in something different, right? Like I'm like a dog chasing Paris. So, for me, that mold, like when I got to university, and that's why I took the year off, it's like it didn't fit what I was interested in, and I wasn't ready for it, right? Because I just my attention would go to something else. So I needed that. I needed to kind of be thrown in the deep end and figure it out and kind of collect my thoughts and realize, okay, jump back in.
Yes. I think particularly from the sector we're in now, and the cleantech sector, it gives you an appreciation for all the luxuries we have in our lives and access to energy and affordable power, and that it turns on when you want it isn't actually the case in a lot of places.
Gosh, I'm sure you guys have had this experience too, like many a night awake just in like 100% humidity in a South American country, just like 40 degrees Celsius weather, like hell.
Yeah.
Right. So
have you got any epic stories that you'd share, or any memories that just come flooding back?
Yeah, definitely a couple. I think one of the most significant ones was we were in Patagonia. I know you spent some time there too, but I remember there was a road that there was, there's only kind of that one road in and out. I think it's Route 66 or whatever. And there was some work being done on that. So we couldn't go anywhere. And we just decided to kind of hike off in the middle of the desert. And we had seen some cool mountains off in the background, or off in the distance. And all of a sudden, these two Aussies and myself and the other Canadian, and we see these two horses running towards us. And there's like, the Aussie guys and the Canadians are like, oh my gosh, like horses, like so cool. Like I want to go on some. And it was at that point kind of that I realized that they were feral horses, and they were charging, like galloping out. And I was like, oh my God, like this could be the end of us, right? Like we're in the middle of nowhere. Anyways, finally, we found kind of like a ridge. And I was like, we need to get on this ridge and get on a slope that the horses can't get down. Sure enough, they kind of just stood and, were super territorial while we were like 10 feet away from them. Like we might have to just sprint down this hill, ball out this hill again. So,
that's crazy.
Yeah.
How did you get on?
Yeah, we just sit on the ridge and they just kind of eventually buggered off after a while. But yeah, it was, we stood there for probably 30, 40 minutes. I was like, don't look in the eyes.
That's all.
So yeah, wow. Yeah. Similar experiences in Canada too, just kind of backpacking and canoeing in the backwaters with moose and stuff, and just never look in the eyes. Right. So
yeah. That's good. Love the background, love the context. Any of your childhood memories or family upbringings that kind of positioned you on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think my folks were really good at not pushing us into things that they thought we'd like to do, but just kind of letting us figure out our own path, right?
Yeah.
Like they never, like hockey obviously is a massive sport in Canada, and they never all the other parents are putting their kids into hockey, and I'm like one of the few Canadians who was not a hockey player. Like I can skate, and not a good hockey player by any means. And they just, they always kind of encouraged us to find our own kind of path, and they took us on their adventures. And my dad was a big surfer, went snowboarding a lot, surfing with him. And I think, big campers as well. It just gives you that early appreciation of the outdoors, right? And I grew up in a small city on the east coast of Canada. We have a fantastic trail system, ton of good camping, ton of outdoor activity that just, just building that appreciation for the outdoors from an early age, I think, is kind of what ultimately, led me to end up here working in the cleantech space, right?
Yeah.
So I think yourself as well, it sounds like too, eh?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like that all of that time spent out in the bush is what maybe saved you from like never leaving the stable road in Patagonia and making
Yeah.
go and do all of this.
Yeah. Geez. thought about that.
And so this now brings us to San Diego. Do you want to tell us a bit about Cleantech San Diego and the Southern California innovation?
For sure. So super interesting organization. So Cleantech San Diego was started about 16 years ago now, really kind of by leaders, some of the academic institutions, SDG&E, recognizing that San Diego really was poised to take advantage of all the renewable energy technologies that were coming online, especially the grid scale stuff. And we realized that there was no real, compared to biocom here that convenes the life sciences, there was really no nexus for kind of the Cleantech industry to kind of unite that private sector with the public sector with the academic sector, right? And so that's what our mission was. And started 16 years ago. Our founder was Jim Waring. He's still active in the organization on our board today. But, we've done a lot of policy advocacy. We've done a lot of kind of special working groups around smart cities, the electrification of schools here in the San Diego Unified School District. My colleague Murray leads that. And, we're up to 130 members now, right? And it's really refreshing. And I think our members really appreciate just kind of having that organization that convenes all these parties together through kind of a business association. And then kind of our biggest initiative over the last 6 years now is the California Energy Commission funded accelerator to support cleantech startups like yourself. So that's really kind of where a lot of our momentum has been laying, a lot of our resources. We're a small team. There's only 5 of us. 3 of us work directly on the accelerator. So, it's a really interesting organization. Do a lot of in-person events, a lot of educational events, do some summits here and there, and then just try and get, just advocate for projects that are good for the county, right?
Yeah. What do you think it is about San Diego that makes it so well placed? Because it has put itself on the map here, hasn't it? It's kind of breaking a lot of ground.
Yeah, I think it primarily comes down to leadership, right? I think, San Diego attracts a certain type of person to live here. I also think you've got to give a lot of credit to, the Navy and the DoD presence here and kind of being arguably one of the birthplaces of microgrids, right? We're just needing to figure out that resiliency for the Navy. And that kind of then translates into, some academia as well. Our institutions here they pump out so much in terms of not only just, innovation and IP, but then also kind of on the policy side of things as well. And, we've done a good job. We've got the geothermal resources to the east of us in Imperial County. So much we go back and forth with LA in terms of rooftop solar deployment. Sunniest city in America. Yeah, it's kind of hard not to be, right? Yeah. So I think it's just a combination of factors, but just some good leadership.
Mm. And in terms of you saying before, like a dog chasing a car sometimes, there's a huge amount of excitement in this market. What is it that's catching your eye right now?
That's a great question. When I first started here about 3.5 years ago, hydrogen was kind of first starting to get talked about, and it's grown significantly. We've got, out of our 34 active companies right now, we've got about 3 companies, maybe 4 companies working on kind of innovation around hydrogen, whether it be electrolyzers or how we store hydrogen. So that's really interesting. Direct air capture, we've got a direct air capture company now. But, I think, Gareth, as I was telling you earlier, I really think just the world needs, and specifically California with our energy challenges here.
Yeah.
We need more microgrids. So anything around kind of behind the, kind of behind the meter energy efficiency, but then also just kind of deployment of microgrids and distributed energy resources. I don't think we get to our greenhouse gas reduction targets without a more aggressive, deployment of those assets. So that's 3 answers.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
What do you think is preventing kind of that adoption and scale?
Yeah, I mean, our sector is one of the most regulated out there. Yeah, if not the most regulated, right? There's so much policy and regulation involved, and for good reason, right? But and I'm no subject matter expert in any one particular area, but from kind of what I've gathered is, I think just with our transmission constraints right now, specifically in the US, I don't think we've put a lot of thought into over the last let's say 5 to 10 years, has been a little bit dormant in terms of building out our transmission capacity needs, right? And, we've got, I think I saw a stat the other day, like we've got more renewable kind of utility scale generation projects in the backlog versus what's on the grid right now, right? Waiting for interconnection, right? So it's, it's not a question of, is there enough renewable projects out there? It's a question of like the resources, the transmission resources in place to be able to do that.
Yeah, or the infrastructure to be able to manipulate it in such a way that's usable and flexible and agile and all the things we need. Yeah, it's really important. What are your thoughts?
Like the blended balanced solution has to be the right way to go.
Yeah.
It does seem like building a lot more transmission in the US is going to be really, really hard because it is such a regulated market. If you want to build a new transmission line just across a state line or a county line, there's a heck of a lot of people you've got to get lined up to agree, or there has to be some probably deeply unpopular top-down push that says we're actually just going to get on and do it, whether anyone will have the political will to make that happen. If you believe that it's not, local solutions have to be built into those. The other thing that gets me thinking about is that system is inherently a little bit less stable, I think, than what people feel like it is. If you look at the way that we pay for that infrastructure, what happens is the cost of building it gets distributed across everyone who's an energy user on the network. But if just 5 or 10% of energy consumption takes itself off the grid, that distribution of cost, it's going out across a smaller base. And it maybe starts to make those people feel even more like, well, this is not a good deal for me. I want to jump up. And what feels like quite a long-term stable system, utilities have been regulated monopolies here for 100 odd years, there or thereabouts, could pretty rapidly unravel into people needing to take care of their own solutions and do it locally. How it plays out, and we'll have to wait and see. But having it in your back pocket that you can take control of what's happening with energy that's critical for all of us to live the kind of lives that we want to, and being able to do it in your own backyard, it's got to be part of the toolkit.
And Zac, you'll probably get exposure to all the stakeholders. All of our businesses, we have our customers, we have our key stakeholders, but you're seeing investors and seeing banks, you're seeing startups. Obviously, interesting times with rising interest rates or macroeconomic conditions being different to what they have been for as long as we can remember. And meanwhile, Cleantech getting a huge amount of push from the likes of the Inflation Reduction Act. What are you seeing? Are you seeing tailwinds? Are you seeing some headwinds? Any advice for startups or businesses out there?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Gareth. I think, one thing that we not fail, but and I'm guilty of it too, but, we're often working in this bubble to kind of commercialize these technologies. And often, that systematic risk is just, it hits people and it takes people by surprise, right? And it's really challenging. And it's when you have that, it doesn't matter how good your innovation is at the end of the day. Like if you have that systematic risk and it's not money pouring in because of these higher interest rates, then it's really difficult to grow as a company and get to scale as a company, right? I think it's been a weird year, right? It's been a lot weird. The last 3 years have been weird. Like we had this crazy amount during COVID, crazy amount of funding. And now all of a sudden, I think Q1 this year, we're down, Cleantech funding is down 39% or something like that, right? Relative to Q1 previous year. So, in terms of what we're seeing, and we're an interesting accelerator because we don't focus on a certain stage. We work with pre-seed companies. We work with companies that are all the way up to Series B, right?
Yep.
In terms of funding stage. We know that it seems like from investors, there's still an appetite for a lot of kind of early stage innovations out there in seed stage funding and deploying a lot of capital there. I think, companies that had these Series A companies that are, close to profitability. You're generating a ton of revenue already, but it's scaled up really quickly. And all of a sudden now we're looking for the next funding round and valuations are way down. The rates are at 5-6% now in terms of the overnight rate. There's less money in the system now, right? So I think a lot of our later stage companies are starting to get a little bit more lean and focus on that path of profitability and versus kind of when's the next funding.
Yeah.
Right. Because that more likely than not is going to be a down round, which is not great for the company, not great for their, current investors don't like it. So it's challenging, but I think, as a seed stage company right now, it's not horrible relative to kind of later stage companies. Also too, just the clean tech sector relative to other sectors out there, whether it be, life science and kind of high tech. There's so much in terms of like positive tailwinds from the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure bill. There's so much funding out there. There's so many credits, both kind of on the commercial residential side, that it's kind of changed a lot of investors' perspectives about, all of a sudden business models that didn't make sense, they start to make a lot more sense. So I think a lot of VCs out there, and even probably some of the CVCs, are changing up, going back to companies that they might have overlooked before. Now their thesis completely changes, right? Where, it pencils out economically, right? Just given kind of the groundbreaking provisions in the IRA and infrastructure. I think it's just under $500 trillion that's going towards clean technologies. So it's wild.
And the bidding war is only just getting started, right? There's what the US is doing, Europe counter, there'll be an Asian counter. Everybody knows that this is where the next wave of generational companies come from.
Yeah.
And everybody wants it to be done in their backyard.
Yeah.
And to rewind to some of the history of Cleantech San Diego, I think it's the people that have been in it from the start, and it's great for the city. Yeah, San Diego's got such strong infrastructure to be a central point in achieving those kinds of outcomes.
100%. And I think, there was a lot of lessons learned, I think, and I wasn't around for it, but Cleantech 1.0, what they call Cleantech 1.0 was there was a lot of activity in San Diego and Imperial County kind of around biorenewables, and that didn't pan out. Really. There was hundreds of millions of dollars sunk into that, and there's a lot of companies, very few of them are still around, right? And I think there's a lot of good learnings there that have been implemented into kind of, you want to call it Cleantech 2.0. For simplicity's sake, around like maybe the traditional VC model of, deploy capital in the first 5 years and then come down to negative in the remaining 5 years. That doesn't really work, right? We have, if you look at the clean tech sector relative to other sectors, like the time for a clean tech startup on average to raise, go from like C to Series B is 2 or 3 years longer. There's other sectors, right? So that all of a sudden, like, because there's a lot of deep tech, it's a lot of hard tech. Like it's in the policy, right? It's a slow moving beast, but it's a really important, there's a lot of, we need to get there, right? So I think people are getting more creative now in terms of, how they structure these funds. There's so much money kind of at the grant level to kind of help bolster and co-invest or do these public-private partnerships, do these pilot projects to help de-risk these technologies. So it's, I think we're a little bit, I don't want to say sheltered, but we've got a little bit of resiliency relative, I think, to other sectors that have certainly experienced that systematic risk more, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think even some of the generalist VCs are now realizing their incumbent target sectors are hurting.
Yeah.
And it's bringing actually positive energy into our sector. I think June 2023, where we are now, if you're not in AI or clean tech, out of vogue right now. But yeah, just that.
Well, that, and you bring up the AI point too, right? Like, I heard somewhere, this is Bloomberg this morning, they were saying that it could become a $500 billion industry, by 2030, which is crazy, right? It would just, it feels a little bit different than crypto in terms of, the scalability and viability of it. Like, I'm just, as one of the rare companies in our portfolio that's working kind of purely on, software and without a hard tech component. Like, I'd just be interested to hear your guys' take on AI and if there's any, like, how that's the possibilities for that to be implemented in the clean tech kind of sector.
Do you want to start? Okay. Yeah, happy to. It's interesting thinking about companies in clean tech, to your point earlier, that take a little bit longer to go from seed to scale. Some of that's because, at least I believe, some of that's because convincing customers to take action with clean tech can take a little bit longer. There's more to it than just hard. Here's the return on investment. Therefore, we're gonna push our chips in and invest. Convincing customers to take action is one of the most important things that clean tech companies have to solve. To get solutions out at scale, you've got to get the mass market to be comfortable that what they're investing is going to deliver them the outcomes that they need and more. I think from where we sit, that's the big opportunity with AI is, helping people in the mass market to understand and be confident to open their wallets and invest in doing something that's new and different. Because something that's new and different is what's necessary and required, and it's the only way for them to get to where they want to go. So whether that's, getting to the bottom of what's happening with your utility rates, and communicating that in a way that you can relate it back to your business if you're concerned about power and emissions and costs, or whether it's trying to compare biogas opportunities that a company might have to building solar or energy efficiency or changing the way that they run their business. Those are heavy lifts today. And I just think there's a huge amount of possibility in making that natural language, making it self-directed, making it scalable and low cost. So that you avoid the trap of having to go and hire, a couple of $100,000 worth of consultants just to get you started and give you a front end for taking the problem on.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think super excited about AI. I think we're starting to play around with it internally, whether we're using it for our own sales lead gen, if we have to get a briefing doc on who our customers are, what their pain points are, what their aspirations are, where are they located. So we're using it from a perspective of packaging a briefing for our sales team to use when they're approaching customers, right through to how do we use this huge amounts of data that we're collecting from every aspect of a project being developed, and learning from that and applying it to Calvin's point. We're kind of firm believers that the hard tech and the capital construction services all exist. But how do we enable them? How do we enable them at scale and remove all that soft cost out of the system? Super big time.
And it brings up, you guys bring up an interesting point too, and that's, I think, one of the big pain points of clean tech overall, and especially in kind of your space, you're selling directly to clients, is the customer education piece. Is that, do you give me kind of the spectrum there in terms of is it people that you're selling to? Is it folks that have a really good understanding, or is it people who have no kind of base level understanding at all? Because it's even me, I'm confused by it, right? And I've been in it for 3 years, and it's not an easy thing to digest in terms of all the different parties that are involved. So we'd love to hear about kind of what that customer journey experience is like for you, and the education piece, right?
Yeah, we've got a huge amount of empathy for our customers because they've never had to think about energy ever. They've had access to utility power that's affordable, it's been reliable, it's been relatively cost competitive, and people weren't under pressure to reduce emissions. And now you've got this triple whammy of costs going up, reliability going down, needing to hit these emission targets. And most people wouldn't even look at their personal energy bills and understand what a kilowatt or a kilowatt hour is, let alone looking at their business bills and knowing how it's changed and what impact it's had on their business over the last 2-3 years. And I'd say most of our customers are non-technical providers. They are sustainability managers, they're CFOs, they're CEOs. They've got lots of other hats to be wearing, and energy is now being placed into their decision-making authority. And they don't really know what's possible or who to turn to or where to begin and how to make sense of it all. That's the opportunity and a challenge because it elongates sales cycles. It makes people less willing to make a decision because there's a lot of uncertainty.
It's such an interesting point you bring up too, because there's, and we need them. Like we have, the state or the Fed set these really good greenhouse gas reduction targets. And if you're bigger kind of global corporate, you have a whole team that can figure out scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions and, buy an ESG software to do that and, have the capacity to build out the resources they need to get to those targets. But like, I think for the clean tech industry, like when our companies are going out and selling a product, like more so than any other sector out there, I feel like there's such a big like customer education piece,
yes,
right? Like, so you're not only just a salesman, or a salesperson, you're also like an educator, right? At the end of the day, it's a unique challenge for sure.
And when you're out there doing that, even if you do encounter a business where you're selling to someone who is well educated, they understand the technology and the value prop and the trade-offs that they're going to make. When you're selling high value projects, high value products in a B2B setting, always the buyer is a committee. It's never just a single individual. So that individual is, if you've got an advocate, you've got a champion within the business, they're still faced with educating all of their colleagues about what it is that they want to spend money on and why it's valuable and why it's useful.
Yeah.
So in virtually every circumstance, education becomes a really big part of the challenge.
Yeah. Geez. Glad I'm doing it.
Yeah. No, but I think those that can do it at scale, that's the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that's where AI is going to play a huge role. And that's where getting your marketing right and PR right. And that's what we're kind of running into as a business, is how do we get that education at scale in a really simplified way?
Good point. And do you think there's like an opportunity for AI in terms of like the actual, like your sales funnel or your kind of customer identification, where you can go, okay, Google Bar or Chat GPT, like, show me all the commercial industrial companies located in this area that make X amount of revenue that are located this close to, a transmission line, to find the optimal kind of set targets and customers, like build a graph on that or build a table on that. Like, is that something you guys have explored at all, or?
It's fair to say we're doing it already.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah. Early days.
Yeah.
And experimenting a lot, but yeah, we're out to do it today.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I did that the other day for trying to find ski resorts that weren't on Icon.
Yeah.
Or Epic yet. And then give me the closest town, what the property value was. So
and I would say the biggest balance that people need to tread though is, I'm sure you're the same, your LinkedIn and your email gets slammed every day by marketing materials. And so how do we bring that education and the exposure, but with the trust and the faith and the relationship and all those other things that needed to support people to make those behind the scenes?
Yeah. Interesting.
So if you could be any energy technology, what would you be and why?
Oh, holy Jesus. That's a great question. Maybe a battery, specifically an EV battery.
Yep.
You can travel around and see what's going on. I think we're starting to move into LFP batteries now. There's a lot of innovation going on kind of specifically around, battery storage technologies and battery chemistries. It's an interesting space. I think it would be fun to be a company coming, a battery that's going up through the prototype phase all the way up to, being adopted to EVs.
I was sure you were going to say tidal power.
You know what? I think marine power is really interesting. Tidal or marine, kind of wave energy. We've actually had a couple companies, not in our accelerator yet, but a couple that we've helped out that are doing some really interesting things. And the thing that's really exciting about tidal and kind of wave energy is that it's like geothermal, right? It's a renewable, or hydropower. It's a renewable asset that can provide that baseline power, right? There's no, there's not an intermittency component to it to a degree. But that's, I think people are just starting to recognize, especially in the US now. Europe's been really good at kind of testing and deploying those large scale kind of projects. But I think the US is finally starting to realize like there's an opportunity, right? Especially with offshore wind development happening now and the ability to co-locate some of these assets, right? Like that'll be an exciting space that we watch, and especially San Diego. We have so much. California in general has so much coastline. Yeah, I shouldn't use that.
Yeah, that's good. There's a lot of talk about surfing.
Yeah, I know.
Get to hang out in the surf all day. I don't know, it'll be all right.
Right? Hang out. Yeah, exactly.
As we close out, any quotes that you love and want to share?
Oh, geez. I think two that come to mind, and I don't even know, maybe Confucius or someone said this, but as cheesy and silly it is, but I think, I heard generosity is the virtue that produces peace, I think, and just, I think just, and you guys are really good at this, but just being willing to kind of donate, being generous with your time, whatever that generosity looks like, I think the world would be a lot simpler and a lot more cohesive if people just had a bit more kind of empathy and then in turn more generous. There's another one too by a Canadian band called The Tragically Hip.
Yeah,
that I love. It's one of those bands that never really made it out of. They're like a Canadian icon, and ask anyone in Canada who The Tragically Hip were, and they know, right? But never really became big in the States or globally. But there's a line from one of their songs that goes, "There's nothing uglier than a man hitting his stride," which is so true, right? It's like you get, especially in the kind of space we work in with entrepreneurs and stuff, and a lot of, people who just get so caught up in the glamour of it, and kind of the ego component comes in, and it is really an ugly thing when, someone loses sight of that. So that's something I always try to keep in mind as well, is just, staying on the right path.
Really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of our core values is empower co-creation. The reason we do that is because, to your point, no one can do this on their own. And if ego gets in the way, or if people aren't willing to partner and be generous with the opportunities, nothing's going to get done. And it's going to take all of us to achieve the energy transition at scale. Yeah, I really appreciate that. That was good. And final question, if you could listen to anyone on the podcast, who would it be and why?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I think it'd be interesting to have someone who was maybe around for kind of Cleantech 1.0, maybe an investor in that space, maybe one of your investors, or just to hear their perspective on what's different this time around, right? I think there's a lot of insight to be gained from that. Like, there's nothing more valuable than having those lessons learned, right? So, I think there's a lot of good learnings from that side. I'd be interested to.
Nice. Are there any resources that you enjoy, any podcasts or news feeds or newsletters that you'd recommend?
Definitely. Our Energy Scene newsletter, which my colleague now does. That's a great one. And our Cleantech San Diego Green Sheets, which Shannon on our team puts out every month. There's some really good resources on that. But in terms of what I listen to personally, I love, there's a guy at Energy Impact Partners named Shale Khan, and he does this great pod. He's been around for a while. And he does this great podcast called Catalyst, where he'll have guests on, and they talk about different topics, different emerging technologies, policy stuff. It's just so good as someone kind of in our space, just to really dissect it and just understand what's going on kind of in the bigger macro picture, but then also what some of the technology in that space are. Mm-hmm. Then also, Bloomberg Green's got a good newsletter as well. I enjoy it.
Nice.
Yeah. What about you all?
The obvious and quickly open one that comes through in that sort of space online is the Climate Tech VC newsletter. I'd also steer towards an old university professor of mine, Mark Ritson, and Mark writes and speaks about marketing and branding, not in the clean tech space. It's just one of the sharpest people you'll ever come across, talking about what it takes to build and grow really successful brands.
Interesting.
Mm.
Yeah. Check what's out.
My favorite right now is CEO Diary podcast, and he interviews some pretty interesting people. But I think what you come to realize is everyone's got their own insecurities, their own issues. No one's got it figured out, regardless of how successful they look from the outside in. I think that's what's very inspiring, is you just got to keep grasping and grinding, and to your point, learning from others, getting after it.
Yeah. And I think just kind of as a closing thought, that's what I love about I think I'm a lifelong learner. Like I like to know a little bit about everything.
Yeah.
And I'm just fascinated. So getting to work with entrepreneurs like yourselves is the greatest part of my job, right? It's just being able to learn about all these cool and innovative technologies is why I do what I do. And just be able to help them out is a bonus, right? So,
yeah. Well, you've had an amazing journey, and it's only just beginning. Really enjoying learning about your renewable rides, and I know you're actually going to get to ride in a few months on your bachelor party in Whistler, which is going to be epic.
I hope so.
Looking forward to hearing all about that.
Yeah.
And then next chapter.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Yeah,
Cheers,
awesome.
Zach. That was awesome.
We receive a lot of questions from business leaders around the world wanting to learn more about the energy transition, what is possible, and where to start. So to help you stay informed and up to date on best practices, opportunities, risks, and success stories, we created an industry newsfeed at veckta.com/news with all our podcasts, blogs, and newsletter. Check it out and connect with Dan, myself, and the Veckta team to learn more. Cheers and have a good one.